I received a comment from an anonymous student that said that this is not a very good class because all I do is teach Keynesian economics. And I appreciate that kind of feedback, if that's a perception. I want to put what I've been doing in perspective, in case there are others who have that concern. Classical economics is where we started. And we traced it from 1776. I mean, you could go further back. But we talked about a market system. And we said this was in a pre-industrial setting, mostly farms, self-sufficiency, etc. And then we said what happened. We believed in that system until the Great Depression. And in the Great Depression, we found out maybe it wasn't working so well. And we saw in the criticisms of John Keynes that he thought wages wouldn't fall, prices wouldn't fall, and sales wouldn't increase unless the government did something. I hope you are confident and comfortable in the idea that you understand both those arguments, that we've covered both those schools. I then made you go through the algebraic model on Keynes to better understand his arguments and to be able to think of the economy in terms of spending. Spending from four different groups. What were the four groups?
Consumption, investment, government spending, and exports.
Good. Consumption spending by households, investment spending by businesses, government spending at all three levels, state, local, and federal, and net exports. Now, having presented, I hope, all of this sufficient that you see it all, my argument is that from 1936 until about 1980, 85, it was a Keynesian world. The Keynesians are the ones who influence policy. Beginning, really, probably before that, probably around the 1975 era. In 1975, another school of thought became emergent, if not yet dominant. And this school of thought, which leads us right into what we're going to talk about for the next exam, this new school was called monetarism. And, of course, that's going to relate to monetary policy, our topic for today, this week, and somewhat the rest of the term. But monetarism stems from neoclassical economics. Free markets. The primary spokesman, at least at the time, a fellow named Milton Friedman. Dr. Friedman received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1976. He's high-powered. If you want a good book to read to understand free markets and the arguments for those, you should read his book called Free to Choose. And I don't care whether you're a Keynesian or a neoclassical, you need to have that book on your shelf and be familiar with it. And be familiar with the arguments, so that if you disagree with them, you at least understand what you're disagreeing with, and if you agree with them, it's good material, good support. This whole thing came to be called the Chicago School of Economics. Dr. Friedman taught at Chicago, and many of his colleagues and students, as they matured, also promulgated strongly the neoclassical view that government basically is a detriment, government gets in the way. What's another word for the Chicago school, neoclassical school?
Freshwater.
Freshwater economics. From the fact that most of the proponents for this belief came from universities located in the central part of the United States as opposed to the coastlines. This school, neoclassical, was the dominant, has been the dominant school in macroeconomics and in micro. Roughly speaking, from 1979 till 2000, I'm going to say 2008, when this current recession happened. And what we're going to see is that a number of people, and in fact a growing number of people, are saying this recession was caused by too much neoclassical, hands-off, no regulation economics. And so now there is a growing swell of people saying maybe we need to return back to Keynes and see what he can teach us, because our economy today in many ways resembles the economy in 1930. An economy that's taken a dive. Okay? Who's right? We don't know. You can make an argument, I think, that Keynes is pretty correct in the short run. Over a period of a couple of years, 3 years, yeah, you'd stimulate the economy and create some more spending. It's not clear how long that will endure. And you have to be careful that when you do it, you don't go broke borrowing money to make it happen. And you can argue that the short run is not as important as the long run, and the classical school is more accurate in the long run. So I'm trying to make it clear I'm not advocating either school in the way that I'm trying to present the material for this course. I will let you know my opinion occasionally, but if you think I'm biased in the way I'm showing you the material, let me know. Yes, ma'am?
Do we have to use, like, if the Keynesian, if Keynes economics, like, if it works in the short run, why don't we just use that, but then, you know, after the short run is over and after we see, you know, us kind of going back into the recession, why don't we just switch over to another type of economics?
I think it's a great question. Philosophically, I think it makes a good sense. In the short run, let's fix it, because in the long run, it runs itself pretty well. A couple of caveats or warnings about that is that it probably might run itself pretty well, but the damn politicians won't let it. That they're constantly passing laws, particularly by lobbyists and special interest groups, that are distorting the markets. And so the idea that it's going to run smooth over the long run, there's going to be outside forces that I think are going to influence that. And I think you've got to monitor it. I think you also have to draw a line. In the neoclassical system, there's very little government regulation. How much regulation is appropriate? If you don't have government regulation in a market, what is apt to happen? In a competitive market, prices are going to stay low and nobody's going to be able to cheat or take advantage of us. But what does it take to have a competitive market? You remember those two things?
Educated consumers.
Educated consumers and a lot of small sellers. A lot of competition and informed consumers. I suggest to you that we don't have that in a lot of markets in the United States. And when you don't have a competitive market, it's subject to distortions. It's subject to abuse by the people who are big and strong and the way they influence policy. So, which is best, and can you do one in the short run and try and do one in the long run? I like the philosophy, but I think there's enough fluctuations in there, you can't just turn it loose. Now that still leaves a huge gray area within which we can debate. Okay? So that's kind of my response to the criticism. I welcome anything you want to say, anything you want to write me. This came across anonymously on Facebook. You can always, not Facebook, Rate My Professor. You can always post there. You can criticize me any way you want. Spell my name right. Son of a bitch is usually abbreviated SOB. Okay? So there you are. If you want to argue or do more on either side of it, let me know.